Hey, this is Mike with Riding in the Ozarks, and I just sat through an hour-plus long presentation from Harley-Davidson on their fourth quarter earnings. So, there are some positives and there's some negatives. Let's get into it. Stick around. This call comes just 2 weeks after Harley-Davidson launched their 2021 models in a 40-minute pre-recorded presentation. The CEO, Jochen Zeitz, CFO Gina Goder did the bulk of the presentation, and Larry Hunn, Chief Commercial Officer, did answer some questions in the Q&A session afterwards. They started the call out with a recap of the Rewire initiative and the results. This slide indicated the Rewire initiative effectively lowered their cost base by $115 million. I circled the bullet point in this slide that I think is the most important to consider as we look at the financial results in this report. It's also important to remember and think about the impact this has had on the dealer network, which, to be honest, is the touchy-feely part of the business that most Harley-Davidson consumers interact with on a daily basis. I think the new approach to supply and inventory management is a driving factor in the financial results we're about to go over. The first slide is the Q4 results, and the motorcycle sales are down 39% from the previous year for this quarter. Financial services represent almost 30% of the revenue in Q4 and operate at a profit, while the motorcycle segment reported almost $200 million in losses. As a result, Harley-Davidson reported a Q4 net income loss of $96 million, which the stock market immediately responded to as people sold off stocks and the price dropped several points today. Before we move on to the 2020 full year results, let's look at this slide showing the number of motorcycles shipped in Q4. As you can see, the number of units shipped is down about 48%. But there's a couple of factors you need to remember here. First, Harley released new models in September of 2019, so last year there was a demand for new models at the dealership. And this year they did not release new models till January, so there was not the same demand for bikes in the fourth quarter. Also, we need to remember Harley is trying to intentionally control supply and inventory of bikes, so they are dictating to some degree what the possible sales are in Q4. It's not purely driven by the market and demand. Now, for some good news. When you look at the full year of 2020, you will see that they were down 24% from the previous year in revenue, yet they still managed to report a net income of $1 million. That means all that cost controlling really did pay off. When you look at this slide, you will see how that inventory management has really come into play. Retail sales in 2020 was down 17% compared to 2019, yet shipments were down 32%. So again, we are selling more bikes than we received. That means those sales came from existing inventory, and you can see here outlined in blue that Harley-Davidson did have 59,000 units in inventory at the end of 2019, and that number has been reduced to 24,000 for year end of 2020. That is a significant change. Now this slide is all about the financial services part of Harley-Davidson. You know, the part that made $77 million in Q4. What I found here was that even though they had fewer loan originations in 2020 than in 2019, they were actually able to finance a larger market share of the new HD motorcycles that were financed in 2020. This business segment is really propping up the motorcycle segment right now. This is the last slide before we start talking about the Hardwire, which is the 5-year strategic plan Harley-Davidson CEO has developed for the years 2021 through 2025. These are just high-level bullets that show you some of the positive aspects for 2020 versus 2019. First, they have 4 times as much cash or cash equivalent on hand as they did the prior year. They have a significant improvement in the operating cash flow, and they reduced capital expenditures over 2019. They also reduced depreciation and amortization expenses as well in 2020. From here, we moved into the Hardwire Strategic Plan. I definitely found this to be more interesting than the numbers crunching part of the call. I was a little critical of some of the Hardwire bullet points included in the third quarter call, but I'm happy to say that the information in this fourth quarter call makes me feel better about the direction that Jochen Zeitz is trying to take Harley-Davidson in the future. The vision, mission, and culture slide didn't do a lot for me, but I did like seeing innovation and evolution being included in the vision part of the statement. The next slide makes me feel good, especially this line right here. Design, engineer, and advance the most desirable motorcycles in the world. I don't mind that they want to leverage the brand, heritage, and legend of Harley-Davidson to be desirable, as long as they're making desirable motorcycles first and foremost. Now we moved into the priorities of the Hardwire Strategic Plan. First is profit focus by investing in our strongest motorcycle segments. This next slide talks about touring, large cruiser, and trike as the largest profit pool with the best industry margins and a leading share. What is not mentioned in this slide or in any other slide I saw in the presentation was the Sportster line. Yes, I know I'm going to get some hate for what I'm about to say, but I've said it before, and regardless of whether I or you like it, I do believe it to be true. All signs indicate to me that Harley-Davidson is going to kill the Sportster line in the near future. Personally, I think this is the last year for the Sportster, but maybe it'll get one more year. I think a lot of it will depend upon how well the Custom 1250 does once it is released. Should that bike be a flop, then they may keep the Sportster around just a little longer. As for everyone who wants to tell me the Sportsters are the most popular models that Harley-Davidson sells, well, take a look at this slide, and it shows that the Sportsters and Streets represent less than 24% of the shipment mix in 2020, and that was up from 2019. The second priority is selective expansion and redefinition to win in attractive motorcycle segments, which of course leads us into the Pan America and the expansion into the adventure motorcycle market. The next slide shows what I believe to be the Custom 1250 Revolution Max power plant, and the text talks about expanding within the cruiser market. During this point in the call, the CEO talked about the Revolution Max and mentions expanding the middleweight cruiser market and hints at a first glimpse on the February 22nd Pan America launch. I think we're finally going to get to hear HD acknowledge the new Custom 1250 is coming to market, and hopefully they'll give us some details about that during the Pan America launch. If you're interested in new bikes from Harley-Davidson or Indian, you might want to hit that subscribe button, because I have another video coming out soon talking about the new bikes being announced by Harley and Indian this month, as well as some tidbits about what might be coming later this year. The third priority is electric, and of course refers to the Livewire. At this point, the CEO talked about how important electric is to our future, and how Harley is committed to invest in electric motorcycles and has created a new division and a dedicated leadership team that is strictly dedicated to electric vehicles. Priorities 4 through 6 were about parts and accessories, merchandise, Harley-Davidson financial services, marketing, and connecting with new and non-riders, re-inspiring existing customers, and engaging with customers in a new way. The HD company culture, sustaining the planet, and driving profitability for shareholders. They touched on an employee program that rewards employees as the company succeeds through an equity grant. This slide highlights the Hardwire long-term financial targets, and it was apparent during the Q&A segment these goals were more conservative than the goals created by Harley-Davidson in the past. The CFO's response was that they wanted to set goals that were realistic and achievable. I have to say that is a refreshing approach to the normal corporate culture that makes promises that they can't deliver. Maybe we are beginning to see a Harley-Davidson motor company that won't take 4 years to deliver on a bike after the prototype is introduced. I do want to acknowledge that Harley has had a lot on its plate this last year between the pandemic and the restructuring of the company. I was also pleased to see this next slide. The first priority was to fund growth and invest in the Hardwire plan, and that shareholder dividends would be second. Stockholders may not be happy about this, but for those of us that want to see Harley-Davidson innovate and improve, we should be. Alright, leave me a comment and let me know what you think about these Q4 results and the direction of the company under this new Hardwire Strategic Plan. If you like this video, make sure you give it a big thumbs up, do that YouTube thing, check out the content on my channel, and if you dig it, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to ring that bell so you don't miss any of my videos. And as always, thank you for your support, stay safe, and keep on riding.